The
Get your hands off
34th
me. I know
floor of
my
the
rights.
Meridian Tower smelled
You're
like
causing a
money.
disturbance,
Not the
sir. You
loud
need to
kind,
leave now.
not cologne and steak. The quiet kind. Filtered air and imported leather. And the particular silence of a room where everything, from the chairs to the people sitting in them, had been selected for a reason. Daniel Hayes did not belong here. That much was obvious before he reached the glass doors. His shirt was pressed, but the crease had surrendered somewhere between the subway and the lobby. His briefcase was the kind that had been good once, that still believed it was good, though the stitching on the left handle had begun to separate in the way that old things quietly give themselves away. He carried it with both hands. He had taken the 6 train, transferred at 51st. Arrived 11 minutes early, because Lily had reminded him, twice, the night before. Don't be late, Daddy. First impressions are important. She'd read that in a book about business leaders. She was 9 years old, and she read books about business leaders. The receptionist looked at him the way receptionists look at men who arrive early and alone, and without a name on the confirmed guest list. I'm here for the Meridian acquisition meeting, Daniel said. Daniel Hayes. A pause. A keystroke. A polite frown. I don't see you on the list, Mr. Hayes. Are you with a firm? I'm an independent stakeholder. She typed again. Her expression held exactly the courtesy her training required. And nothing else. She was perhaps 26. She wore a headset and a blazer, and the particular expression of someone doing a job that demanded constant management of other people's expectations. He did not envy her the work, though the office was climate-controlled, and the chair was probably ergonomic. I'll call up to verify. One moment. He waited by the wall of glass that looked down into Park Avenue. The taxis moved in long yellow streaks. A woman walked a dog, the size of a small couch. Across the street, a scaffolding crew worked in silence. 3 men in orange vests doing the kind of work that the 34th floor never thought about. It's going to be fine, he told himself. You have the documents. You have the clause. The rest is just a room. The receptionist looked up. Mr. Hayes. Someone will escort you. The someone was a security guard named, according to his badge, R. Cole. He was polite in the way that security guards at expensive buildings are trained to be polite. Which is to say, he did not smile. The elevator rose in silence. The boardroom was built to impress. 3 walls of glass gave it the appearance of hovering over Manhattan. The 4th wall held a screen large enough for a cinema. Around the oval table sat 14 people, lawyers in charcoal, analysts in navy, 2 women who might have been partners, or might have been partners' assistants. The distinction in dress was deliberately unclear. At the far end, at the position that belonged to the person who owned the room, sat Garrett Whitfield, CEO, 52, hair the silver of expensive watches. He did not look up when Daniel entered. No one looked up. This was the first weapon, the deliberate non-acknowledgement. It said, "You do not register." Daniel moved to the side of the table where an empty chair sat at a distance from the others, not at the table, beside it. The chair of someone who was there to present materials and then leave. He set his briefcase on the floor. Opened it. Removed the folder. A man to his left, late 40s. The kind of jaw that photographs well, glanced over and then looked away. Marcus Elliott. Chief Financial Officer. Daniel recognized him from public filings, though they had never met in person. Elliott's name appeared 46 times in the documentation Daniel had spent 3 weeks preparing. Daniel knew the number because he had counted. We're waiting on the Voss team, someone said. They land at 4. Another answered. Then we have time. Garrett Whitfield looked at his phone, put it face down. Looked at the room with the particular gaze of a man who has been in enough rooms to know that the meeting hasn't started until he decides it has. Then he looked at Daniel, not in recognition, in assessment. The kind of look that catalogs shirt quality, posture, brand of briefcase. The look that concludes before it finishes looking. Who are you? Whitfield asked. Daniel Hayes. I hold a retained interest in the core architecture licensing agreement dated March 2019, Section 11 of the One of Teens. Are you with Callaway? No. Massa Brandt? I'm independent. Whitfield looked at his CFO. Elliot spread his hands slightly, a small gesture that meant, "I don't know who this is." And that gesture, that tiny performance of not knowing, told Daniel everything. They knew exactly who he was. "I think there's been a mix-up," Whitfield said, turning back to his screen. "This meeting is restricted to principal parties. The retained interest clause in Section 11, security." The word came out of Whitfield's mouth the way a man drops a cigarette. No heat, no drama, just done with it. R. Cole reappeared. Daniel didn't see where he'd been, and another guard materialized at the door. They were professional about it. There was no grabbing. There was a hand placed gently near Daniel's elbow, and a phrase delivered in a low, even tone. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me." Daniel didn't argue. He picked up his briefcase. He looked at the folder on the table, the one he'd set down when he entered. Then he looked at the floor beside the chair where, during the brief disturbance, a single piece of paper had slipped from the folder. It was a drawing, crayon on construction paper. Blue sky, yellow sun, a man and a small figure holding hands in front of a building. Written at the bottom, in careful, 9-year-old handwriting. "Good luck, Daddy. You belong there." He picked it up, folded it carefully, put it in his breast pocket. Then he walked out. Behind him, someone laughed a short sound, cut off quickly. The glass doors closed. The meeting resumed. The clock on the wall read 2:47 p.m. The hallway was the kind that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled ambition. A row of chairs lined one wall, the kind meant for waiting assistants and secondary guests. Daniel sat in the one nearest the window. He did not take out his phone. He looked at the city. There is a version of Daniel Hayes that the public record does not contain, not because it was expunged, though some of it was, but because the people who build things rarely appear in the photographs of what they built. In 2011, Hayes had co-founded a small software firm called Lattice Infrastructure Systems with 2 colleagues from his graduate program at Carnegie Mellon. The firm's core product was an adaptive routing protocol that could optimize data transfer across distributed networks with a latency reduction that, in 2011, felt like something from 10 years in the future. They had 3 clients in the first year, 7 in the second. By the end of year 3, they had been cited in 17 patent applications by companies that had licensing agreements with them, and one company, a mid-size enterprise platform provider called Meridian Group, had approached them about a deeper arrangement. At the time, Meridian was run by a man named Paul Reston, who had built the company from a regional IT consultancy into something with real infrastructure. He and Daniel had shaken hands over coffee, not champagne. They had read each other's documents personally, not through 6 layers of counsel. The agreement they reached was detailed in a 41-page contract, Section 11 of which contained a clause that Paul Reston had insisted on, including because he believed, as he told Daniel at the time, that the people who build things should never be completely separated from the things they built. That clause gave Daniel Hayes a retained licensing interest and consultation rights in any transaction involving the core architecture regardless of subsequent ownership transfers. Paul Reston retired in 2017. Garrett Whitfield arrived in 2018 with a mandate to grow the company aggressively. He had come from private equity. He understood numbers the way surgeons understand blood clinically, without sentiment. In early 2019, Daniel's wife, Claire, had been diagnosed. By March, when the licensing agreement was renegotiated and extended, Daniel had attended 6 rounds of chemotherapy with her, driven Lily to school every morning because the routine was the only thing keeping the child's world from spinning, and had begun the slow, silent process of understanding that some things cannot be fixed regardless of effort or intelligence. Claire died in November of that year. She was 37. Daniel had taken Lily to Vermont for the winter. He did not attend meetings. He did not return calls. He cooked simple meals and read bedtime stories and let Lily sleep in his bed for the first 6 weeks, because he understood that grief in a child looks different than grief in an adult and requires different things. When he returned to professional life in the spring of 2020, he found that the internal documentation at Meridian, the records of who had built what, who had contributed, which elements of the architecture had been reorganized. His name appeared in a footnote, one footnote, in a technical appendix, on page 31 of a document no one read. He had contacted Elliot about it. Elliot had responded through a junior attorney who explained, in language of practiced politeness, that the company had undergone significant organizational documentation updates and that any questions about historical contributions could be directed to the Corporate Records Department. Daniel had read Section 11 again. Then he had done something that took him longer than anything else. He had waited. He waited because Lily was still learning to sleep through the night without calling for him. He waited because a drawn-out legal dispute would cost him the energy he didn't have to spare. He waited because Claire had always said that the right moment to act is the moment you can act with your full attention, not the moment you're most angry. The $90 million acquisition of Meridian Group by the Kessler Capital Partnership was announced in a trade publication 6 weeks ago. Daniel read it twice. Then he called his attorney, a woman named Patricia Gorman, who operated a quiet practice out of a building on Lexington Avenue, and who had reviewed the original 2019 contract on the day it was signed. "The clause holds," Patricia had said. "They should have bought you out before announcing." "They didn't." "Why didn't they?" A pause. "Because whoever reviewed the documentation didn't read page 31 of the technical appendix." Daniel had said nothing for a moment. "Or," Patricia added, "they read it and assumed you wouldn't notice." He had driven Lily to school that morning. She had made him a card, a house, a tree, and 2 figures under a sun. She had written, "Good luck, Daddy. You belong there." She didn't know what the meeting was. She just knew her father was going somewhere important and that she believed in him. He had put the card in his briefcase. Now he sat in the hallway of the 34th floor and pressed his hand once against his breast pocket, where the folded drawing rested. He did not leave. 2:49 p.m. The hallway was quiet. Through the glass wall of the boardroom, he could see, distantly, the shapes of people seated around the table. Someone was presenting something on the screen. The image was too far to read, but the body language in the room, forward-leaning, attentive, suggested the meeting had recovered from the interruption without difficulty. Of course it had. He had been a minor disruption. A man with a wrinkled shirt and an old briefcase, escorted out by 2 guards. In 20 minutes, they would not remember what he looked like. Daniel took out his phone. He found a contact listed only by initials, WB. He pressed call. It rang 3 times. "Yes, it's time," Daniel said. A pause of exactly 2 seconds. "We're 12 minutes out. The south entrance." "Understood." He ended the call, put the phone in his pocket, looked at the city again. 2:50 p.m. A woman walked past with a stack of folders. She looked at him with the mild curiosity that one extends to waiting strangers, and then continued down the corridor. An associate from one of the law firms, probably. Someone doing the work that made it possible for the people in the glass room to talk about numbers in the millions. He thought about what Lily had said last Tuesday. They had been eating cereal, she preferred the kind with marshmallows, which Claire had always called basically candy, and which Daniel had stopped pretending to resist, and she had looked up with the sudden, sideways gravity that 9-year-olds achieve when they are about to say something they have been thinking about for a long time. "Daddy," she had said, "when you win, do you feel good? Or just less bad?" He had put down his spoon. "What do you mean?" "Like at school when someone takes your seat, and then you get it back. It doesn't feel good. It just feels normal again." He had looked at her for a moment. She had her mother's way of arriving at the exact center of a thing without circling it. "I'm not sure I'm going to win anything," he had said. "But if you do," he had thought about it. "I think it feels like being seen," he said finally. "Not good. Just like being seen." She had considered this with the seriousness she applied to important questions. "That sounds kind of lonely," she said. He had not answered. Because she was right. And because some truths are better honored by silence. He thought, not for the first time, about the version of this morning in which he had not come. It had been a real version. 3 weeks ago, sitting at the kitchen table after Lily went to sleep, he had written 2 lists on a single sheet of paper. On the left, reasons to proceed. On the right, reasons to let it go. The left list was longer, but the right list had two entries that outweighed everything on the other side by sheer mass. The first was Lily's stability. The second was Claire's voice in his head, which was not a mystical thing but a very practical one, the voice of a person who had known him completely and who would have sat across from him with her coffee and said, "Why are you doing this?" Not legally. Actually, what is the actual reason? He had sat with the question for a long time. The answer, when he found it, was not about money. It was not about recognition. It was about a clause in a contract that a man named Paul Reston had insisted on because he believed something specific and unfashionable and correct about how people who create things should remain connected to them. Reston had put that belief in writing, and then people who did not share the belief had tried to quietly paper over it. That was the actual reason. Not grievance, not pride. Not the specific satisfaction of watching Garrett Whitfield's face recalibrate. Those were real, but they were not the engine. The engine was simpler. Some things, once established as true, cannot be permitted to be quietly made untrue without someone noticing. He was the someone. He had taken 11 months to get here. 11 months of reading case law at the kitchen table after Lily's bedtime. 11 months of Patricia Gorman sending him careful, measured emails that always arrived between 9 and 10 in the evening, which told him she worked the same hours he did, and for the same reasons, not ambition, but the specific restlessness of people who cannot leave a problem unfinished without feeling that they have failed someone. They had never discussed this directly. They did not need to. The thing about quiet power is that it does not announce itself in advance. It moves through channels. It prepares documentation. It files the right copies in the right offices at the right times. It does not call press contacts. It does not leak. It waits until the moment the other party is most exposed, not out of cruelty, but because that is simply when the facts are most legible, and then it walks through the door. He had told Patricia in their first meeting, "I don't want to destroy the company. The company didn't do anything wrong. The company is 230 people who show up and do work." She had looked at him over her reading glasses. "Then, what do you want?" "Correction," he had said. And for the people who built on the foundation, to have a stake in what the foundation became, she had written 2 words on her notepad. He couldn't see them from where he sat. Later, when he came to trust her completely, he had asked what they were. "Worth doing," she had said. 2:53 p.m. The elevator at the far end of the hallway signaled its arrival with a soft chime. Daniel did not turn around immediately. He straightened his cuffs. He pressed his hand once against his breast pocket. Then he turned. The 4 men who came off the elevator first were not large in the theatrical way. They were large in the functional way, the way of people for whom size had always been a tool rather than a statement. Dark suits, no lapel pins, no earpieces visible. They walked with the particular economy of motion that comes from years of training and the particular alertness of people who always know where the exits are. Behind them, a woman in a charcoal blazer, carrying a single document case. Patricia Gorman. Her silver hair was pulled back precisely. She walked the way people walk when they have spent 30 years in rooms that tried to exclude them and have long since stopped adjusting their pace for anyone. Behind her, a man in his early 60s. William Barlow. He wore no tie. His suit was the kind that did not need to announce itself. He had the unhurried posture of someone to whom urgency had long since become optional, because at a certain altitude, urgency is always someone else's problem until you decide to make it yours. Barlow had been Paul Reston's largest private investor. He had known Daniel Hayes for 11 years. He had declined 3 offers to sit on Meridian's board under Whitfield's tenure, once by email, twice by not responding at all. He stopped beside Daniel. They did not shake hands. They looked at each other the way people look at each other when the plan has reached the moment of execution, and there is nothing left to say. "The documentation?" Daniel asked quietly. "Patricia has the originals," Barlow said. "We have certified copies filed with the court clerk's office as of this morning. The Kessler partner? Aware." He's not happy, but he's aware. His counsel advised him this morning. Daniel nodded. He looked at the glass boardroom doors. Inside, through the glass, he could see the moment the first person noticed the group in the hallway. A junior associate, young, positioned near the door, looked up and then looked again. His expression shifted in the small, precise way that expressions shift when the pattern of a situation changes and the brain hasn't yet caught up with what it means. The associate said something to the person next to him. That person looked toward the hall. Then someone said something to Garrett Whitfield. Whitfield turned. For a moment, through the glass, his face held nothing, the trained blankness of a man who had learned to show nothing while he calculated. Then, something crossed it. Something quick and subtle that might, in another context, have been mistaken for confusion. It was not confusion. It was recognition, not of Daniel specifically. He had genuinely dismissed Daniel. It was the recognition of the shape of a situation. The four men, the attorney, the person they were with, the body language of people who had not come here to negotiate. The boardroom door opened from the inside. Someone, a junior attorney, stepped into the hallway. "Can I help you?" "No," said Patricia Gorman pleasantly, and they walked past him. The boardroom changed the moment they entered, not loudly. That is the thing that people who have only seen this kind of power shift in films do not understand. It does not arrive with music. It arrives as a change in atmospheric pressure, the way the air in a room shifts before a storm. The 14 people at the table had varying responses. Some went still. Some reached for their phones. One, a junior analyst near the far end, looked around at the others to understand what she was supposed to be feeling. Marcus Elliott, the CFO, had gone a particular color that was not quite white and not quite gray. He recognized William Barlow. He had attended a conference 3 years ago, at which Barlow spoke for 18 minutes without notes or slides. And the 18 minutes had been more instructive than the rest of the 2-day event. He had shaken Barlow's hand at the reception afterward, and Barlow had been courteous and entirely unremarkable. He did not look unremarkable now. Garrett Whitfield rose from his chair. He was a man who rose before others could rise. It was a habit so practiced it had become reflex. "William," he said. The tone aimed for warmth and landed somewhere near it. "Garrett." Barlow sat down, not in a guest chair. In the chair at the head of the table, the chair that Whitfield had been occupying 20 minutes ago and had just vacated in order to greet them. He sat in it without ceremony or comment. The way a man sits in a chair that he considers his own. Whitfield stood for a moment. Then he sat in the chair to Barlow's left. Daniel took the chair to Barlow's right. He set his briefcase on the table. Patricia Gorman placed her document case on the table and opened it. She removed 3 sets of documents and set them in a precise row. "For the record," she said, her voice carrying the particular quietness that needs no amplification, "I am Patricia Gorman, counsel to Daniel Hayes and William Barlow Capital Partners. We are here to address the matter of the retained licensing interest under Section 11 of the March 2019 Core Architecture Agreement and certain related matters that have arisen in the course of documentation review for this transaction." A lawyer across the table, a man with rectangular glasses and the specific blankness of someone who is billing for every second, said carefully, "Miss Gorman, this meeting was not scheduled to include—" "No," she agreed, "it wasn't." Silence. "The Kessler Capital legal team," she continued, "was notified this morning that Mr. Hayes's retained interest applies to this transaction and constitutes a blocking position on the proposed asset transfer. I believe counsel for Kessler is on the line." She looked at the speakerphone in the center of the table. A click. Then a voice. "This is Lawrence Chu, representing Kessler Capital Partners. We have reviewed the documentation provided by Miss Gorman's office and are prepared to acknowledge the validity of the Section 11 interest, pending further due diligence." The silence that followed had weight. Garrett Whitfield had the look of a man who was still calculating, still finding angles, but whose calculations were coming back empty. He was very good at this. He had survived situations that had ended other people's careers. He was performing composure. But Daniel was watching Marcus Elliott. And Marcus Elliott had stopped calculating. Daniel opened his briefcase. He did not hurry. He removed a single bound document, not the original, which Patricia had, and placed it on the table in front of him. Then he looked up at the room, for the first time since he had entered. On September 14th, 2020, he said, the internal attribution records for the lattice routing architecture were amended. The amendment removed my name from the primary contributor field and replaced it with a designation of legacy third-party licenser. He opened the document to a marked page. This is the original unaltered version, time-stamped September 11th. This is the amended version, time-stamped September 14th. He placed 2 pages side by side on the table. The difference is 3 days and 17 words. No one spoke. The amendment was authorized by the office of the CFO. He did not look at Elliot. This is the authorization code. This is the internal memo chain. And this, he removed a 3rd page, is the email sent from a company account to the third-party due diligence firm hired for the 2021 refinancing, directing them to use the amended documentation rather than the original. The lawyer with rectangular glasses said, "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to." The due diligence firm, Daniel continued in the same quiet register, sent a confirmation reply. That reply includes a note from their analyst that reads, and I'm quoting directly, "Confirmed, will use revised attribution, as per instruction." Note: original filing showed different primary contributor. Should we document the discrepancy? He looked up. The response to that question was, no. The room was very quiet. The junior analyst at the far end had stopped looking around at others to understand what to feel. She now looked only at the table in front of her. William Barlow had not moved. He had not looked at any document. He sat with the stillness of a man watching something he had been expecting. Arriving on schedule, Marcus Elliott's hands were flat on the table. He had placed them there when Daniel began speaking and had not moved them. They were the hands of a man who had decided, somewhere in the last 45 seconds, that the only safe position was stillness. I want to be precise about what I'm not saying, Daniel said. I'm not saying the Meridian Group is without value. The platform you've built on the foundation of the lattice architecture is real work done by real people, most of whom are in this room right now. He paused. I'm saying the foundation was misrepresented in a filing to a lender. That has a specific legal name. The lawyer with the rectangular glasses had been writing something on a notepad. He stopped writing. Garrett Whitfield had been looking at the documents on the table. Now, he looked at Daniel directly for only the 2nd time that afternoon. The first time had been when he said, "Remove him." He did not say anything now. The Kessler transaction can proceed, Daniel said, with adjustments, which Patricia will outline. He looked at his attorney. Patricia opened the 2nd set of documents. 3 conditions, she said. It took Patricia 11 minutes to outline the conditions. During those 11 minutes, 2 things happened simultaneously. The first was that Lawrence Chu, on the phone from Kessler's legal office, asked 3 precise questions and received 3 precise answers, and at the end of the 3rd answer said, "We'll need to discuss this internally. We'll be prepared to respond by close of business tomorrow." The second was that Marcus Elliott asked to be excused to make a phone call. Patricia paused. Daniel looked at him. Elliott was 51 years old. He had a daughter at Georgetown and a house in Westchester that he had bought 4 years ago at the peak of his confidence. He had a dog named Arthur and a wife named Stephanie who taught high school English and who made, as he frequently reflected, a fraction of his salary while doing something that arguably mattered more. He was not a villain. He was something more banal than a villain. He was a man who had made a choice that seemed small at the time, in service of a number that seemed important, and had not adequately considered what the choice would look like when someone took the time to trace it. "You can finish the call after," Daniel said. Not unkindly, factually. Elliott put his phone on the table. He nodded once. Patricia continued. "Condition 1. The attribution records would be corrected in all public and regulatory filings before the Kessler transaction closed. Condition 2. A portion of the licensing value, the figure was in the documents, would be distributed to a fund, established in Claire Hayes's name, designated for single-parent workforce support programs. Daniel had established the fund 18 months ago. It had been operating quietly on his own contributions. Condition 3, and this was the one that moved through the room differently than the others, was simple. The Meridian technical team, the engineers and architects who had spent years building on the Lattice Foundation, would receive equity participation in the Kessler transaction proportional to their tenure and contribution. They should have had it already, Daniel said. They built on something real. They deserve to share in what that becomes. Garrett Whitfield was looking at the table. His composure had not broken. It was too deeply structural for that. But something beneath it had shifted. He had been in dozens of acquisitions. He had never been in one where the conditions offered by the opposing party were intended to benefit people who worked for him. These conditions are not negotiable, Patricia said. However, they are not punitive. We are not seeking personal damages. We are not pursuing the evidentiary matter in a way that complicates the transaction timeline, provided the conditions are accepted by close of business Friday. The lawyer with the rectangular glasses looked at Whitfield. Whitfield gave the smallest nod. We'll need to review with our board, the lawyer said. Of course, Patricia said. She began to gather her documents. Across the table, a woman who had not spoken during the entire meeting, mid-40s, dark hair, one of the two whose role had been ambiguous, looked at Daniel. Mr. Hayes, she said. Her voice was careful, but not cold. I manage the technical team here. I've been here 6 years. A pause. I didn't know about the attribution change. I know, Daniel said. How? Because your team's work is visible in the architecture. People who know what they're doing leave fingerprints. He looked at her directly for the first time. The third condition will cover your team. All of them. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at the table, and Daniel recognized the expression, not gratitude exactly, but something in the neighborhood of relief. The particular relief of someone who had been worried that the shape of the world they worked in might mean something about them. It didn't. He knew what that worry felt like. The meeting adjourned at 4:12 p.m. People gathered papers. Handshakes were brief and tactical, as they always are when both parties are uncertain how the next 48 hours will resolve. The junior analyst near the far end, she had not said a word during the entire meeting, picked up her materials with the focused deliberateness of someone trying to appear less shaken than she was. He understood it. It is disorienting to sit in a room and discover that the structure you work within was built on a foundation described to you incorrectly. Not because you were deceived deliberately, but because the people above you had found it convenient not to look closely, and convenience had its own gravity. The woman who managed the technical team, the one who had said "I didn't know" with clean directness, caught Daniel's eye as she moved toward the door. She gave him a nod. Small. Deliberate. The kind that means, I heard what you said. About the fingerprints. About the third condition. He nodded back. That was sufficient. In the corridor, as the parties moved toward separate elevator banks, Garrett Whitfield fell into step beside Daniel. The 4 men in dark suits adjusted their positions without being asked. Whitfield said, I didn't know the full scope of what Elliot had done. Daniel walked. I want to be clear about that, Whitfield said. I heard you, Daniel said. They walked 6 more steps. Is there anything you want from me? Whitfield asked. The question was not defensive. It had the specific quality of a question asked by someone who has reached the edge of what they know how to do and is genuinely uncertain what comes next. Daniel had expected something more calculated, an attempt to reframe what had just happened as a mutual misunderstanding resolvable through good faith. Instead, just this. A question without armor. Daniel stopped. He looked at the elevator doors ahead of them. There are 230 people at Meridian, he said. Most of them took the job because they needed it. Some of them took it because they believed in what the platform could be. He looked at Whitfield. The deal you're in now will determine what their next 3 years look like. Do it carefully. That's it? That's it. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. He had the look of a man who had been prepared for any number of things, counteroffers, anger, demands, and had not been prepared for this. You could have filed, he said. You could have blocked the whole transaction. Yes, Daniel said. Why didn't you? Daniel pressed the elevator button. Because I have a daughter who reads books about business leaders, he said. And I'd like her to eventually read about ones who didn't need to burn things down to prove they were standing. The elevator opened. He stepped in. Patricia Gorman stepped in beside him. The four men took the next elevator. William Barlow, who had said nothing since he sat down in Whitfield's chair, offered Whitfield a brief nod before the doors closed. The elevator descended. Patricia said nothing. She had worked with Daniel long enough to understand when silence was the better contribution. At the lobby, they stepped into the late afternoon light of Park Avenue. The scaffolding crew across the street was packing up. The city moved around them with its usual total indifference. The Kessler team will accept, Patricia said. I know. Elliot will likely resign before Friday. Daniel looked at a cab passing in the yellow afternoon light. He has a daughter at Georgetown, he said. That's a tuition payment. Patricia looked at him. I'm not relieved about it, he said simply. I'm just aware of it. She considered this. You're a strange client, she said. My wife used to say that too, he said. In different contexts. He hailed a cab. The apartment was on the third floor of a building on the Upper West Side that had good light in the morning and a radiator that clanked in winter. The building was the kind that had been built in 1962 and had decided not to apologize for it. Daniel liked it for the same reason he liked old briefcases and direct conversations, because things that don't pretend to be more than they are tend to be exactly what they say. He could hear the music through the door before he reached it, something from the playlist his sister-in-law had made, which Lily played when she was in a good mood, and when she was in a bad mood, and when she was in the specific mood that was neither but felt like both. Claire's sister, Rachel, watched Lily on days when school let out early. She was the kind of person who showed up without being asked and stayed exactly as long as was needed, and then left without needing to be celebrated for it. Daniel had more gratitude for her than he had ever successfully expressed. He unlocked the door. Lily was at the kitchen table with a worksheet that appeared to involve fractions. She had a pencil behind her ear that she had clearly put there as a stylistic choice and then forgotten. She was wearing a sweater that said, Camp Algonquin, across the chest, and had a small orange sticker shaped like a star on her wrist, which meant today had been a good day at school. Her teacher gave them out for completed work. Rachel was at the counter with tea. How'd it go? Rachel asked. With the particular neutrality of someone who knows how to ask a question, while leaving all the room in the world for any answer. Fine, Daniel said. Fine good, or fine complicated. Fine both, he said. Lily looked up. She assessed him with the rapid, accurate instrument that children apply to the emotional states of parents. You look tired, she said. I am tired. Did you win? He sat down across from her. He set his briefcase on the floor. He reached into his breast pocket and removed the folded drawing and set it on the table between them, smoothed open. She looked at it. Then at him. It fell on the floor in the meeting, he said. I picked it up. She studied the drawing with the critical eye of the person who had made it. The sun looks weird, she said. I think the sun looks fine. It's too round. Suns are round, Lily. Not like that. He almost smiled. He looked at the drawing, the blue sky, the yellow sun, the two figures holding hands in front of a building. She had put windows in the building, tiny, careful squares, each one different. He hadn't noticed that before. I didn't win anything, he said. I just reminded some people that something had been forgotten. She thought about this. Like when I reminded Mrs. Patterson that she forgot to give back our spelling tests. A little like that. With more lawyers, she went back to her fractions. He sat with her for a moment. The radiator made its noise. The music continued. Rachel brought him a cup of tea without being asked. Outside the window, the city was going about its evening with total commitment cabs and deliveries, and the particular percussion of 8 million people moving through the same space for different reasons none of them aware of what had happened on the 34th floor, all of them the better or worse for its outcome, in ways they would never trace. Lily, he thought. This is what it was for. Not the clause, not the documentation, not the satisfaction of watching Garrett Whitfield sit in a chair that belonged, by weight of room, to someone else. This. A fraction worksheet, and a cup of tea, and a drawing with a sun that was, according to its maker, too round. He picked up the drawing and put it back in his breast pocket. Leave it out, Lily said without looking up. It's better flat. He put it on the table. Okay, he said. It arrived on Thursday, not email, not through Patricia. A white envelope, hand-delivered by a building concierge who looked mildly puzzled by the assignment. The handwriting on the front was not Whitfield's. He would have had an assistant address it, but the notepaper inside was heavy stock with Meridian Group at the top and below it, handwritten in full. Mr. Hayes, I am not good at this kind of letter. My wife tells me I'm better with spreadsheets than with words, and she is correct. The board accepted your conditions this morning. Legal is working with Patricia Gorman's office on the filing corrections. The fund documentation will be completed before the transaction closes. The equity participation for the technical team will be structured as a closing bonus pool. This was the form that had the best tax treatment for them, which I thought you would want to know. I owe you an apology that I don't know how to make adequately. What was done to your attribution record was done without my knowledge, but within my organization, and while I was responsible for that organization, I believe those facts make me responsible. Regardless of what I did or didn't know. I also want to say something that is not an apology but is true. I looked at the architecture documentation this week. Really looked at it. For the first time. I've been running a company built on something I never fully understood. I understand it better now. If you are ever willing to consult in whatever capacity, and with whatever time constraints you require, I would consider it a significant thing. There is no pressure or expectation attached to this. G. Whitfield. Daniel read it twice, folded it, set it on the kitchen table. Lily, who had been watching him with the peripheral awareness she had inherited from her mother, said, "Who's it from?" "Someone I had a meeting with." "The meeting from Tuesday?" "Yes." She thought about this with the patience that she applied to things she had decided were worth understanding. "Are you going to write back?" "Probably. What are you going to say?" He looked at the letter on the table. He thought about 230 people. He thought about the woman who managed the technical team, who had said "I didn't know" with a kind of clean directness that he had appreciated. He thought about Paul Reston, retired somewhere in New Hampshire, who had insisted on a clause in a 41-page document because he believed that people who build things should never be completely separated from them. He thought about Claire, who would have read the letter and then put it aside and said, "So what do you want to do?" Not what should you do. What do you want to do? "I'm going to say yes," he said. "But with conditions." "What conditions?" "Tuesdays and Thursdays," he said. "I have to take you to school." Lily considered this seriously, in the way she considered things that affected scheduling. "Okay," she said. "But you have to actually be on time. You're always 9 minutes late. 7 minutes late." "9. I'll be on time," he said. She went back to her book. He picked up a pen. He wrote the reply on the back of a piece of Lily's construction paper because he couldn't find any of his own note paper, and because it seemed, on reflection, appropriate. Saturday morning. October, the good kind. Where the air has given up pretending to be summer and committed fully to being fall. They took the long way through Riverside Park. Lily was wearing the orange jacket that she insisted was still her favorite, even though she had owned it for 2 years and had grown enough that it now hit her at the wrist. She walked beside him with the particular gait of a 9-year-old who has decided that walking is interesting enough to do at its own pace. She was talking about a book she was reading. Something about a girl who builds a radio and uses it to communicate with someone across the country. She was explaining the radio mechanics in a way that was about 40% accurate and 100% engaged. He had looked up the book the night before, after she had fallen asleep the long-distance signal, and read the first 2 chapters. It was a good book. The girl in it was stubborn and resourceful, and made mistakes that had real costs. The author had not protected her from consequences, which was the thing that made the book worth reading. He had thought about giving it to Lily when she was done, for another read. Then he had thought, she'll find the things in it that she needs. Children always do. Two joggers passed them on the path. A man walked a pair of identical terriers. A woman sat on a bench reading something on paper, an actual book, pages and spine, with the total absorption of someone who had found the only place they wanted to be. There was a couple ahead of them, older, walking slowly with the synchronized pace of people who have spent decades adjusting to each other's rhythm without thinking about it. The man said something. The woman laughed. They did not stop walking. Daniel watched them for a moment and then looked away. No one looked at Daniel Hayes. No one knew who he was, or what had happened on the 34th floor 4 days ago, or what his name meant to the architecture that ran beneath a platform that several 100,000 businesses used every day. He was a man in a park with his daughter. She stopped walking. "What?" he said. She was looking at something on the path, a stick, long and curved. She picked it up. "This is good," she said, holding it up to assess it. "This is a really good stick." He looked at it. "It's a good stick," he agreed. She tucked it under her arm and continued walking, resuming the radio explanation at exactly the point where she had paused. He walked beside her. The river was silver in the morning light. The trees were doing what October trees do. The city moved at its Saturday pace, which was slower than its weekday pace, but still relentless, still alive, still indifferent in the way that cities are indifferent. Not coldly, but massively. The way large things are indifferent to small things, not out of cruelty, but out of scale. He was not large in that context. He was a man with a good stick and a daughter who was explaining radio mechanics with complete confidence and an orange jacket with sleeves too short. He thought about what she had said at the kitchen table, over cereal, 7 days ago. "When you win, do you feel good or just less bad?" He had said, "I think it feels like being seen." She had said, "That sounds kind of lonely." She had been right. It had been lonely. The kind of victory that happens in a glass room in front of people who will never understand the full weight of it is not the same as being known. It is recognition, which is not the same thing. This, the park, the stick, the radio explanation was closer to the real thing. He had not gone to the 34th floor to prove anything to Garrett Whitfield. He had not gone to hear anyone say his name correctly. He had gone because a clause in a contract said that the people who build things should never be completely separated from them, and he had decided, on a Tuesday morning while putting his daughter in a cab to school, that this was true of more things than contracts. You do not abandon what you built because someone else decided your name wasn't worth keeping in the record. You wait until you can act with your full attention. Then you act, not to win, to correct. And then you come home and you have cereal, and you listen to your daughter explain radios, and the power that you did or didn't demonstrate on the 34th floor of the Meridian Tower is completely, entirely, and correctly irrelevant to the quality of the morning. He reached over and adjusted the stick under her arm before it slipped. She didn't break stride, didn't look at him, just kept explaining, "The greatest power is the one you don't need to demonstrate."